Welcome to this seminar. It's a closing seminar. It's also a Friday afternoon, so the week is heading to its close. My name is Reta. I work here at Media Evolution, which is a place for professional belonging, learning, competence development, and collaborative foresight, which is very much the context that we're gathered here today as part of the futures we build. So handing over to you, Petra, to welcome us.
Thank you, Reta. I'm Petra. I'm an architect at Fojab here in town, and I'm also theme lead for the innovations and new applications within Smart Built Environment, one of our areas that we're working with. And I'm here because this project that we are here to talk about and spend the afternoon sort of circling around. It started about 2.5 years ago when I got an assignment from Smart Built to look into a new strategic project. And this project was was all about figuring out how can we really make a difference? What can Smart Built really do? What is the effort that we need to put in to the sector to drive innovation and transition and transforming the sector to a more sustainable future? So I started with interviewing and talking to a lot of different people, different sectors, different professions, trying to figure out what is this all about then. And there were lots of different answers. We had tons of ideas about this needs to be done and that needs to be done. Regulatory, how we procurement and everything. But there was also this sort of undertone or thread running through those conversations about we also need a common vision. We're lacking the bigger picture. We do lots of different things. We invent lots of different pieces to this puzzle, but we don't know what the bigger puzzle is or how they all fit together. And there was a sense of if we don't have that bigger picture, if we don't have that common vision about where we're actually heading, then it's really, really hard to drive things. It's hard to understand why should I be doing this or why should we be doing that? Why should we invest in this knowledge or technology or whatever it is? Maybe we should just wait a little bit until it's all figured out by someone else. So this is how the futures we built came about. Smart Built Environment then, it's one of our strategic innovation programs in Sweden. We have 17 in total, and Smart Built has been around since 2016 and has another 2 years to go or so. What we do is that we fund research and development within the built environment connected to digital transformation. So that's the area where Smart Built is operating within. And today we have about 320 projects, I think I just heard. And we have a total funding of about 500 million Swedish kronor into research and development that's gone into the sector. So there is this sort of, I think there is a clear will to do things. And there is some sort of funding to get, and we are very much on a path. There are lots of different projects, lots of different ideas out there. I wanted to say something about Smart Built goals because they're important, and I have them written down here. Because they're also a little bit hard. So here we go. Smart Built has 4 goals, and those are important for the visions that we're going to hear about later on. So the first one is to steer towards a circular resource management and more efficient processes, from early planning all the way to long-term management. We're also steering towards a built environment with higher quality, sustainable, beautiful, durable, and robust. Going to give a clear contribution to cutting greenhouse gas emissions in line with Sweden's 2030 climate targets. and to support new value chains and business models based on life cycle thinking, platforms, and new constellations of actors. So these goals, they sort of point towards a different way of operating. They point towards a more sustainable future, a more sustainable sector. And that is what Smart Built wants to achieve with all the funding we're doing. And this is so where the futures we build come into this. So how do we do this then? And how can we help the sector to see that bigger vision, or see that common goal of this is how we could actually work? So we 2 years ago, I think it is, we set out an open call. We asked for transdisciplinary teams to come in with ideas about how they would like the sector to see, to look, to be organized, to function in a world where Smart Build's goals and the global climate goals are met. So we asked the teams to come up with imagine a different future, to visualize that future, and to communicate it. We asked for 3 teams, and there were tons of super interesting applications, intriguing team constellations, and we ended up with 4 teams. And then you started working, and we're going to hear about your visions in a little bit from all of the 4 teams. But then we said the project shouldn't stop there, because it's easy to just say, okay, here's the vision, and you go ahead with it. So we said there's another body of work that needs to be done, and that has Reta, has been head of this project, or project lead for this, together with Rebecca, that's over there, and Frida, who's hiding somewhere, I think. Yeah. They've been running this excellently, and through this year, you've been engaging with the sector with how can we strengthen and deepen and take those visions further, and use them sort of as a springboard into conversation with the actors in the sector, and saying, okay, what could this really be then? How could we behave or be? And very much about, as the topic for today is, bridging from today to another future. And that has landed down into a brief. And we had this conversation that I think is interesting. When you first said we'd done a brief, I was a bit confused. I think you meant it as a summary, a short description of all this work. And for me, a brief is an action or an instruction, something to act upon. And I think that is very much the essence of it in the end. It is a description of all the thoughts and the ideas that come out of this project, but it is very much a sort of a call to action for the sector. So with that, we want to hear more about it.
Yes, thank you so much, Petra. I just realized I put my notes over here. I'm excited and nervous to be closing off this and kind of handing over this project to those of you who will receive the brief, also those of you who are following us online. And I think this is one of the projects that has been, as you mentioned, Petra, earlier, very ambitious in the question that we have posed from the very get-go on how will the built environment look like, or how might it look like? How might it function, be organized in a future Sweden, where we have actually reached these shared sustainability goals? We have done that throughout, as you heard a little bit on kind of through a many different steps process. We had that open call and got wonderful applications for teams, and 4 were selected, whom we'll hear from soon. And then this little bubble, that was part of it, where the teams worked. Soon you will hear about the processes. Each 4 teams had their own process and way of going about this. But we also hosted different lectures, both for the public, for the sector, to kind of raise and join in thinking about the future and how we imagine the future of the sector and our built environment all in all, as well as then giving some targeted support for the teams. We've had an amazing advisory board from very many different perspectives, from different corners of the sector, that has both hosted different workshops with the teams, as well as done kind of one-on-one coaching and feedback on the visions and on the process and so on. And I know that this support has been really valuable for the team. So thank you for a big thank you for the advisory board. We've done a publication as well that you can access online. I have 4 copies. We're kind of almost out of that, and I can tell you there were very many copies of this, where you can, but it's available digitally as well, where you can read about these visions, and you also have a playbook with some ideas on how you can bring and use those visions in your work, both in English and Swedish. We had this beautiful launch event early this year at Form Design Center. Maybe we need to close the curtains a little bit. Will somebody? No? No? Yes, thank you. So you can see it's just, I know, illegal to block away the sun on a day like this. Launch and an exhibition of these visions, and you will be seeing more pictures like this from the exhibition that was there for 6 weeks, and hopefully some of you were able to go and participate in that. And after that, we went on a tiny little tour, both here in Malmö, hosted 2 workshops here, as well as one in Gothenburg, one in Stockholm, that I will be presenting kind of the results or some of the insights that emerged, and the call to action that came from those conversations. And here we are today, closing, reflecting where we have been and what we bring with us, but also looking forward into how do we build these bridges that we so need all in all. And coming back into this question just briefly, I've been kind of, I think it started almost with this project actually, that I started working closer with the built environment sector. My background is in political science and global politics, where we work a lot with ideas and practices and kind of the soft things in a way. And for me previously, the built environment was something that you kind of, it just was there. It was a given. And if you wanted to change it, then you would kind of move somewhere else. So you could change your built environment, basically. And now I've met over the course of the past 2 years, I've been talking to people working in municipalities, working in construction companies, real estate developers, architects, and so on, who kind of see the built environment in a completely different way. You actually see that these things can be changed. We can always kind of, now I'm very much simplifying, but you can change it. You can build something new, you can redesign, you can adapt, and so on. And with that came the realization that actually some of the softer things, the values, the ideas, identities, processes, and I wouldn't maybe call economy as softer, but in a way it is also a softer thing. It's not as tangible as a building is. Like those are kind of taken as given sometimes in the sector. And I would say that we have, with this project, tried to do 2 things. First of all, normalize the fact that some of the things that we might take as given, as in the norms and economies and business models and things like that they can also be reimagined. And secondly, to normalize talking about that even though we see that the world is moving into different directions, we can also find potentials for more positive outcomes, and it's okay to talk about those things as well. And we can visualize things and the sector and ourselves to have changed for the better in order to find some hope. Because with this, the feeling of stuckness that some might feel, I feel that on a regular basis, is basically due to the kind of the in-between period that we're in. We've kind of taken the step, we've set a lot of goals. We know a lot of things we know that a lot of the ways of working are not sustainable and we need to change, but we feel like we're in this in-between. And in order to get there, to get to the new, to start to see glimpses of the new, we also need, or one of the things that we need is ways, showing us ways in which we could we could get there. What is the direction or the many directions? We will be talking about multiple visions of the future here today for a reason. And I think this, for all of you and all of you following and all the people who have somehow been part of this project, is that this kind of giving you the hope as a change maker to continue the work on that you're doing, so that you don't give up, because I think that is also a very easy thing to do, because we do need hope. And I wanted to bring this quote by Lars Svensson, who's a philosopher, on who just points at the causal importance of hope. That to hope is not just a state of waiting, sitting back to see what happens, kind of, Petra, what you were alluding to, but to actually be drawn towards the future. And it does affect our actions collectively, because we kind of start to already believe that that future is a reality, and through that we can bring about change. So purpose of today is to kind of refill on hope, I hope, and to look back, what have we learned in the course of this project in taking ourselves into different types of hopeful futures, and having conversations around where is it that we actually are going, and what are we longing for, all in all, and how do we bridge from that future in, and how does the conversation look like when we actually look at it from the point of the future that we want to be moving towards? Does the conversation shift, and can we actually uncover things that we can work on? We have a big program. Soon we will hear from the teams who have been working and exhibited their visions, and now 6 months later we'll get to hear what they have learned and how the work that they did as part of this project impacted their own practice or the practice of their team members, and what they want to bring to us from those reflections. I will then present the brief in a brief way, on the brief, and then we have a little panel here that will reflect both on the takeaways from the brief and the conversations today, with a great group of panelists, very much working with change in the systems level, and discussing those things before we close, and then there will be time for mingle and conversations and discussions, and hopefully you'll stay for that. Good to know for those of you who are physically present in this space, fire exits behind me and over there where you came from. Bathrooms, toilets are by the big wooden table outside. And we will have a short Q&A, reflections, and then we take the conversation to outside and continue discussing. Yes. All right. With this, I would like to start off the team presentations. We will hear from all the 4 teams. Each one will get about 10 minutes to share. And this is very much teams that have put together constellations. Oftentimes they didn't work together before. They spent 6 months. We were giving them a lot of inputs, and they were in discussion with many, many different stakeholders. And they were also navigating this field of how do you envision something that sometimes feels out of reach, and how do you bring that into people's imagination going forward. And we start off with a team that is called Rehearsals. You can see the team members over here, but we have Luve Di Marco, who is in cyberspace, joining us all the way from Stockholm.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Beautiful. Let me just share my screen here for my little presentation. So I am part of the team Rehearsals. We call the project also Rehearsals Toward an Economy of Care and Repair. And it's me and myself together with Margarita Wacko and Natalie Hase, Tobias Daustad, Jelena, and Peter. And we asked ourselves in the beginning of this project, what is the key question for us in relation to a future sustainable construction sector? And for us, it was really this question of how do we address the existing building stock? And how can we make better use of it and also learn from it in order to improve the future construction that still needs to take place? For us, I mean, I can read this quote from Finn as well that came up in early conversations. How can we weigh up the evidence for and against the model of demolition and reconstruction? Demolition destroys embodies values across different spectrums, environmental, social, material, and economic, which can take decades to rebuild. We urgently need to make the false economies of demolition-driven development legible. Where could this possibly be sort of played out and rehearsed in the best possible way? We think it's within the housing that was built during the Million Program, which, despite the sort of strong vision for accessibility and equality, is now throughout the nation facing challenges due to potential demolition and short-term economic decisions that really started to undermine the social and material values that we saw. And we also, in composing the team, already saw and were kind of worried about certain trends across the strait in Denmark, in the UK, in France, of demolition and privatization. And we really wanted our visions to draw from the very societal ideals that we had when these buildings were constructed. And we saw that as a chance to really look at that. And where better to start than with a particular property in Rosengård called Landskanslisten, owned and managed by MKB since its construction, in order to find a sort of specific case to rehearse different futures, seeing it both as a sort of paradigmatic case for maybe Million Program housing as a whole, but at the same time also being incredibly careful to its sort of individual specificities. And I think this is something that became very apparent in our work as a team, that this importance of bridging the scales, like keeping a sort of system-minded approach, thinking about potential scalability, but not forgetting that every home and every sort of not just area, but even parcel or property in a particular area is unique and has a unique history. So with this sort of the mixed expertise that we had in our team, part of our team started looking almost like detectives at the sort of past in order to find sort of clues for present and future use of this property. And we could see that, of course, a building is not constant. It has gone through a number of transformations and changes that are perhaps not really valued or talked about as I mean, these buildings are not talked about as sort of adaptable and flexible as they in fact turned out to be. But there were also, of course, challenges that came up along the way. And one of the primary ones are the sort of short-termism in both political decisions, but also the economic models that govern public housing. So these economic models really became the starting point for us, and we focused on the ones that govern particularly public housing in Sweden, and zeroed in on something that we found, that there was a difference between the book value of these properties or of this particular property and the much, much higher market value. And on a private market, this surplus value is something that would be used to pay out dividends. But somehow for the public companies, this potential is just latent. It was just sitting there. We asked ourselves, maybe there is an alternative that public housing companies can utilize this. And could they do so in order to support much needed development efforts, whether it be the sort of reallocation of existing budgets in a better and more equitable way, whether these surplus values could go into future maintenance and strategic transformations that are necessary to sort of future-proof these properties, or whether this surplus value could also become a sort of service for the local citizens in enabling new construction of much higher quality in the sort of adjacency of this site. And this resulted in these three visions that you see here, that we call rehearsing a rent freeze, rehearsing renovation, and rehearsing revaluation. And what was interesting to us really during the process of this is that we quickly realized that somehow presenting this sort of glossy rendered images of the future was much less important than actually finding a way to design visions or in a way almost provocations that challenge the underlying logics that were at play here, that challenge the economic and the regulatory systems in order to imagine a future where, you know, as our sort of target point was, where values like care and repair and a more equitable distribution were really put at the fore. So somehow maybe our visions of the sort of future of this particular property are not that different from what one would see today. But it's interesting for us as sort of urban practitioners, I think, to not, or to challenge ourselves not to sort of start by drawing a sort of presumed future, the way that it should look like, but really to take a step back and really understand the sort of both architectural questions, but as well as the social, regulatory, and economic ones. And I think with that, I think we could really continue to, or turn the sometimes rather naive but powerful question of what if, when thinking about the future, and underpin that with a series of sort of knowledges that we could really extract from expert panels, from sources in academia, from local residents, from stakeholders, from MKB being the sort of client for our project, underpin this question of what if into something like, what if we try? Like, what if we try and rehearse? What if we try, and we might not succeed, but what if we try and imagine an alternative future that can look in a slightly different way? And that I think is our sort of key takeaway from this project is turning this sort of open question into a sort of operative standpoint. And that's something that we're continuing working on now. We're in dialogue still with MKB, looking at some other areas under development, as well as Huge, the public housing body of Huddinge kommun, to try and see whether this sort of latent potential or this latent surplus value is something that they can use to challenge the sort of contemporary norms around maintenance and care. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Luve. Really inspiring embodiment of what if in your practice, and we very much look forward to following the work. I also wanted to say that if you're curious about that publication, you can find it outside of the room by the coffee after the seminar, so you can delve in and do get in touch with Luve if you have further questions. With this, I would like to welcome our second team to present. This is Beyond Blueprints, and Vanessa, you're joining us to share what you went through and how your teamwork was. So, Vanessa, you have the floor.
Oh, thank you. The mic. I'm just going to orientate myself. Great. So good to be here. So our what if was, what if we engage young adults in creating life between houses? And we looked 15 years into the future. So in 2040, we go beyond blueprints to create a resilient cities, living ecosystems where people connect and nature thrives. This shift calls for a cultural transformation in which every citizen becomes a co-creator of their environment, enabled by the smart built space. In this space, advanced digital infrastructure connects places, partners, materials that share values and goals. It can be connected with ideas and individuals who want to contribute. And this creates new kinds of working relationships around a place that we want to develop together. We worked with young people, of course, in our process. We met up with, sorry, I'm just aware of this mic. Should I change mic or are we happy? Just, okay, thanks. Yeah. So we spent half a day with 30 16-year-olds. And I was really curious. We wanted to merge, you know, when you do future scenarios, you begin to recognize them. You have the tech scenarios about the city, you have the green scenarios about the city, the social scenarios, and so on. And we wanted to merge these three, tech, green, social. I was really curious about what do young kids think about this? I mean, are they interested in activating themselves? Do they have agency? So during this half day, amongst other things, they got an exercise where they had to imagine being in the future. And I gave them a key to a space of their choice in the city that they would fill with activities. So they worked together and listed what would they use the space for. And afterwards I asked them, how did this feel? And one boy said, I felt so honored. I got the key to the city to do something. Then I gave them a new exercise. I said, okay, so the municipality wants to support your work, but they have one condition. You have to find ways of incorporating a value, care, in this activation. So what kind of activities and for whom would you do using care as a value or implementing that? And one girl raised her hand and she asked me, should I do it? Yeah, I'll just switch. Okay, thank you. And this young girl asked me, what does care mean? Omtanke, vad betyder omtanke in Swedish? Of course, I tried to explain this for her. It gave us in the team something to think about. So we're creating this future. We want young people to be a part of it. We want to develop their agency. What do they need to learn? What do they need to practice to actually be a part of it? And that was the first insight. We have to involve young people in a school age already if we want them to be able to contribute. So in this story, there's a young person, Alex. They have an idea. It's a floating cave. And thanks to the smart built space, this advanced digital realm, Alex can instantly be connected with the help of a guide, an AI agent, that connects the idea to an interesting place in the city where the cave could be built, material, and coalitions of professional bodies that would be interested in developing this idea together with Alex. Writing a story like that is quite fun. I'll tell you what's challenging. That is to describe this smart built space. I worked with digitalization for 25 years, my whole professional career in one way or the other. These are very abstract concepts. The core of the idea is that when you have your unit, your information, your description of a piece of land or capability that you want to share on these premises with these goals and these values, it can be connected with other units by itself, smart contracts. So that information can fly away and work for you. But this is what our first attempt looked like, and it's kind of messy. I mean, I'm sure this has some value if you dive into figuring out what are the boxes of this smart built space. But it doesn't really have that strong connection for the heart, at least not for me, which a vision needs to have if it's going to draw people in to actually act. And I know all of us have been on one or the other side of a digitalization project, digital transformation. Either you're the person trying to get an organization to change, or you're part of the team that is told that I need to change my way of working. It does not always go well, and it's quite a tough road. So you have to find ways of being clear and try to engage people. So how did we do? Well, we did list the innovations in this vision for the sake of being able to reference where did we get these ideas from. We have the learning program, we have the smart built space. I won't get into the integrated innovation stewardship, it sounds advanced, but basically if you're collaborating across organizations, you need a organizing body to uphold that kind of collaboration. And we all know it can't be a project because projects end. I'll get back to you about the sensory fireplace. So our take was to build stories. We told each other stories in the project team about these different innovations, and we wrote stories. And Malin Lampa, who is at a tech company called TechSeed, she wrote the story about the hummingbird. It started as the information entity being in a cocoon, and once it was qualified to fly, it became a hummingbird. And she'd read this story to her team at TechSeed, and they loved it. The story, allegedly, even someone brought it home to their husband and read it to their husband, who was an engineer or is an engineer, and he was like, oh my goodness, this is what I've been working on all of my life, to get this hummingbird to fly. That's the work of digitalization and advanced digitalization, to get information into the virtual realm so that it can start working. But when we brought this story to Katrin Bedjo Arash on our team, who works with real estate owners, she was like, no, that will not fly with the CEOs of real estate owners. It's just not going to happen. So, oh, here's the team, by the way. They're fantastic. So Beyond Blueprints is a narrative. There is a structure to it, but it needs to be filled with a lot of stories. A lot of people need to join in and make sense of these stories and to start to tell their own stories. So the exhibition was about the future fireplace, the sensory fireplace where we meet to share stories, to reflect on the work we're doing and develop new ideas together. And in the story of Beyond Blueprints that you can read in the green booklet, so beautifully produced, there is a gathering around Lumen Mind, and it's the people who work around realizing the floating cave. We tried this concept in Malmö. We also tried it in Stockholm, and we invite people to sit around Lumen Mind and tell them who are they, what would they like to contribute to, and what does their happy place look like in the city. And we found that these kind of meetings generate so much interest, ideas, possible contributions. We tried it in different settings. This is up in Stockholm. We opened the doors of this container and put the sensory Lumen Mind in there. That worked well as well. All in all, we collected a lot of ideas. And the way to see these ideas is that they can be contributed into the smart built space. It's not an idea from a workshop. In 2040, it can actually be an idea that a citizen sends in and can get to work with together with the right collaborators in quite a short time frame. We learned something from the sensory fireplace, and that's a group of people found it difficult to sit down in the yoga position on the yoga cushion, and that's sort of men around 40 and above. So we had to bring in chairs to be able to sit down. Maybe it means something. Maybe we need to work more to be able to gather all of us around in these smaller settings. So what has happened since we did the exhibition? Well, from the real estate world, we're getting reports, you know about this. AI agents is not a what is it, it's how should we implement it. That's interesting. Will we have an agent in 10 years or so who can guide citizens into the smart built space? We have another report that I actually have to read if I can. From sorry about this. It's not my field, so I can't draw it from the top of my mind. So this is from SKR, Swedish Municipalities and Regions. They have a research and development project on the shared use of municipal facilities. And a report is that Beyond Blueprint inspired a shift away from the narrow emphasis on digitalization and tech towards placing importance on the human and social aspects of that work. So recognizing the need of having a guide in that process, and also recognizing that we should not only cover facilities, but look at the associated land areas, so how people actually make meaning around the facility, and also consider alternative uses, both of buildings and land. There's more to this tale, but I think I've run over time. So I will simply stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you. Very inspiring to see how you have both bridged the digital and help people make sense of it in different metaphors and different ways that does not work with all across different stakeholders, but that has to be adapted as well, and as well as to steer your bold engagement of different groups into the work. So thank you so much. With this, I would like to welcome our third team. We have Now Is the New Tomorrow, and I see our computer is running out of battery, so maybe there's a charger somewhere. And Now Is the New Tomorrow has a very clear name, and we will be hearing about more of that. We have Gustav Magnusson and Johan Pitura here. We also have Therese Arvidsson is here with us from the team. Yes, I will hand over that you have a microphone.
Yeah,
and
so yeah, we can also mention Erik Larsson, who's not here. He's here in spirit, I guess. Yeah, so we are Now Is New Tomorrow. Okay, so perfect. Yeah, so our vision in Now Is the New Tomorrow is a vision of the future that looks very much like today, actually. It's the physical presence is the same as we live in today. But we're still envisioning a sustainable future, which means that there has to have been some sort of change. And yeah, our change is not in the physical environment, but it's within ourselves and within our relationship towards each other and how we work together. Okay, we do it like that. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, to get to this place, we envisioned 4 systemic shifts. So the first one is how we see value creation and how we value creativity. And we see a shift, and this is really, I mean, it's close to something that Rita talked about, and it's also very close to my everyday profession as an architect. So today we value the creation of something completely new with the use of resources, usually depletable resources. and we see that as something of value and that we're creating value. And in our vision, this is no longer true. We don't value that kind of creativity, but we value the creativity where we actually work with what we have and the resources that we have available. It also connects directly to the second shift, which is into the vintage economy. So when we not anymore rely on putting in new resources in our value chains, the value becomes much more focused on what we have, both in our physical environment, but also the relations that we have towards each other. So the value shifts from being something that we put into our system and instead working what we have, of course. This also means that, yeah, sorry, my voice is a little bit, a little bit vanishing, but I will get to the fourth point. The last one or the third one has to do with ourselves. So when we're working with a circular economy or a circular way of thinking, it also means that we change how we work together. Our focus become much more about using creativity to create relationships and create structures of how we work. We stop working towards goals and deadlines and definitive solutions, and instead work much more with the process and looking to continuing processes instead of delivering something. And the last one is, of course, we need to also incorporate nature into this. Nature is already circular, so it's quite easy to envisioning nature as a part in a circular world. But it also means that in these value chains where we can't put in a lot of new materials, we are really reliant on growth as a way to get materials into our systems. Yeah, let's move to the next one.
So the name of our group was Now is the New Tomorrow, and that's a kind of that's an attitude that the future is already here. It's here in our driving forces, what drives us ahead. We don't know how the future looks, but we know we all came here to listen to this because of some driving force that we had within us. And that's the reason why we're going to end up in 1 hour in the future, and something has happened because our driving forces took us there, not because we made an image about how it would look in 1 hour from now. So therefore, we decided to focus on ourselves, inwards. Who am I? Who am I tomorrow? And what is driving me into the future? And because of this, yeah, you can change. We created this roles of the future, kind of professions, which are helping us to reflect on who we are. Our goal for the exhibition was that people should be able to come there and reflect inwards. Who am I and who could I become? It was nice when Johanna, you told me that you choose your new education because you were there and you reflect inwards. That's exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted not to say you should be this person. We wanted to say that we want you to reflect upon who you are and who you are driving yourself to become into the future. So these are our roles, which are also kind of questions to help us to reflect inwards. The first one is a question about democracy. Who are building our cities? Can everyone build our cities? Or is it only certain kinds of companies? And when we ask everybody in the building industry, they also say that they want everybody to participate because it's a synergy in an ecosystem that includes everyone. So there's a composite gap here. Who do we need to become in order to reach that democratic society where everybody chips in? The second one is a question about circularity. That's the one that's easiest to explain. If we need to be more circular, we need to be able to handle all that material, and we need to be able to create all those places and spaces and handle the circularity in the building industry. The third one is a question of going from delivering functions to enable people. we live in a world where also our regulatory frameworks is about delivering plans, delivering something. We have a deadline and we deliver something and the project ends. But we imagine that the future is something that just continues. We are enablers, and I'm enabling you, Johan, to do this, and therefore we're going to head into the better future. Instead of me building a school, I'm enabling Johan to help us to do better learning, and that might end up that Johan designs the school, but it might also end up in something else, because learning is a capacity, not a function. And this is also about giving Johan, then as an architect, if I take him as an example, the capacity to program his building and to change the functions over time and these kind of things. The fourth one we call the network architect. We thought it was fun because usually you think of an IT architect when you talk about network architects. But this is about relationship, that we are lacking relational intelligence. We are lacking emotional intelligence. And we think that that capacity is more important when we go into the future. We need to be able to handle that filter, that when we have a project, it will always go through the filter of a person who has relations, who have emotions, who have political connections. We need to be able to have tools for that is as good as all the other tools. And the last one, I think you explained quite well with the renaturalization, and that's a knowledge gap in that, to understand how it's both about entering a world where we might have flooding, as in the picture. There's a knowledge gap perhaps in dealing with the climate disasters, but there's also a knowledge gap in understanding how do we reinvent the city as something more natural, as a new ecological system? How do we see land and city as one and everything as something holistic?
Yeah, so something about our process. Of course, we had interviews and we had seminars. 2 minutes, okay. We did something that was new for us, but also gave us a lot in this process. Then that was working with policy gaming. So we had, I don't know how many it was, like 5 policy games or more, something like that, where we actually played out scenarios together with people that worked in the field today, to see how we can react and see what happens when new things emerge. The policy gaming also became into something that we delivered for the final result. So we developed a game. I have one copy left. I will put it outside with the rehearsal book later. Where you can actually try this out and use it as a conversation piece, or do a real policy gaming of possible futures.
And that's it. I guess time is up, but I think we have got lots of lessons from this, and I'm working with the future images of Malmö 2055, and this is changing our own question as well. What is our projects if we need to be the enablers? And
Super. Thank you so much, Johan and Gustav and the whole team. Thank you. And it's been wonderful hearing from people, some of you who are here today, who have been part of these workshops, and also who've come to contact with this work and how they have felt transformed, and also you've helped them to put words into things that they were maybe already practicing, but they didn't really know it was a thing. So it's this kind of world building with words, all in all. Our final team is team called Waves, where we have Gustav Eden, but you have a big team with international people and locals here in Malmö as well. So Gustav, I welcome you on stage to present what did you do, what
Amazing.
did you learn,
Thank
where
you.
were you in the future?
Thanks. This is on, right? Yeah, you can hear me. Right, so one of the interesting things after the exhibition that we did was that we were invited to do a Petra presentation to go through the project. And so I thought I'd show that today, and also some of the, we actually built a digital twin that went parallel to the exhibition. And so we have data and we can see some indications of how this kind of tool can be used in the future. So this is our team, Team Waves, digital engineers, architects working with floating sustainable architecture, Anna and Mira from White, and me, skateboarding coordinator from the city of Malmö. And I'll be standing here for the rest of this presentation. Perfect. So, all right, okay. So for this presentation, let's first consider what we are producing when we are talking about the built environment. We are talking about the quality of life, the subjective experience of being a human in the city. Everything we build is supposed to facilitate this end. A lot of the time we build and we assume that life follows. This isn't necessarily true. So we then considered, what infrastructure do we need to face change? If anything defines our time right now, it's that the world is moving under our feet. And if so, if we try to aim for the future, chances are it's going to have changed and we're going to miss. So how do we need to approach the future? What infrastructure do we actually need? And where is the world changing in Malmö? As you would all know, everyone is invested in Nyhamnen. Why were we interested in Nyhamnen? Well, Nyhamnen is set to double the coastline of Malmö. It's also a new infrastructure project. The existing coastline in Malmö is some of the most socially valuable and diverse areas. Everyone in Malmö comes to the coast and use it in different ways. So we were interested in seeing what kind of infrastructure of visions exist about Nyhamnen. So we set out to interview as diverse a range of people from Malmö as we could. People from civil society, people from culture, from business, young people, old people, skateboarders, seaweed farmers, harbor people in the city, people who actually are working with the construction of Nyhamnen as well. And what we discovered is that when you talk about what future do you imagine, we all kind of use the same language. We say we want it to be sustainable, we want it to be inclusive, we want what's best for everyone. And then you ask the question, well, what does that look like? And then what you get is that what becomes clear is that we all want to belong. So we want the future where we have a role. And the roles are defined by what we're good at and what we like. And we can't decide what we like. So this is a photo from the mobility department in the city of Malmö. So if you're good at, if you spend your life training to organize traffic, to make the city work for different types of vehicles and for pedestrians, do you think this is a great future? This is what the future looks like. If you're a skateboarder who wants to engage creatively with the urban environment and reinterpret that environment to communicate to your friends, like, how was I creative? How did I perform in this environment? Well, then you have a very different view of what the city should be, and also what it should facilitate, and what the values are that are embedded in this in the built environment. So we realized if we just speak about the city, then we won't necessarily meet, we won't understand what we mean. So we need tools to show these visions, to show where am I, what do I mean, what do I value, where do I belong? And so, of course, we also looked at who gets to shape the city today. What are they good at? What do they care about, right? And so we looked at the existing town planning process. Well, it's slow. It's linear, it goes from an idea to finished. Usually the ideas aren't coming from the people who live in the city, but professionals invested in the built environment in different ways. All the money, or a lot of money, is spent on construction. And then it gets handed over to people going, hey, weren't we good? Look at us, we planned this for you. And people go like, well, I live here, I don't want to use the city in this way. So, sorry to have a bad phrase, but bird shit architecture, like, wow, that just landed there, you know? And I don't want to belittle people who are very good and dedicate their lives to doing great planning, because we have to respect that. But I mean, this is kind of a problem with the system. So if the city that gets constructed, if we make a mistake, if people don't want to live the way we thought they would or hoped they would, then we have to start over again, tear it down, do another slow process. And that's a really, if the world is changing fast, we don't have the time. If we can't use materials for environmental considerations, we can't start over. And also, we're not building social infrastructure in the process. So this runs the risk of having a kind of bird's eye view of the city where we're good at acting, because we want to be good, right? But we're not very good at reacting and being humble to how people actually want to use the city and taking in the way people actually live. And this is an example from skateboarding, where we see that if skateboarding communities get a skate park built for them, they become consumers. But when they work and they are invited to build the park themselves, then they build a community. And they also develop the next idea for the next project. Like bread tastes better if you bake it yourself. You don't just produce the physical space, you produce the social infrastructure. So then we were really fortunate to be in this project and be exposed to people who are, who have a lot of, who work in the sort of cusp of new technology. And we were really, so we actually took examples that exist already today to show, like, if we take the logic from what already exists today, we project it into the future, then this future is likely. How can we go from this linear, slow process to an inclusive, circular process? But I think it's important to first of all say that we think that we have a building crisis. Perhaps I would say, do we need to build at all? We are using the indoor spaces of the city less than 20% of the time. Parking lots are empty, cars are standing still. We think that we're going to, because we see the physical infrastructure, we think that that's going to solve our problems. But really, we have a cultural problem. We have a problem of use. So I think before we go into this, consider, how can we change our use? How can we change our behaviors to use the city in different ways? If we are going to build then, let's consider, how do we produce agility? How do we produce learning? How do we produce relationships? Well then, prototyping is a good way. Perhaps don't build all of Nyhamnen, build one building. And don't even decide what it's going to be, but rather invite people in. Invite culture, invite civil society, invite the university, invite new technologies to come in and ask them, what problem would you define? What problems do you think exist? And then give them a task to build something. And then see what you learn. And when you've built that, you're going to have defined new problems, new solutions. You're going to have created a learning infrastructure. And we'll see, as time passes, we're going to have learned a lot more. And if the world changes rapidly, we're going to be able to change our course along the way. We avoid missing with guesswork by doing it step by step. So you already know this technology. It looks likely that in the future, anyone can go into an AI model, have a dialogue about a vision of what the city should look like, and ask, like, okay, print. And you get perfectly approved, or perhaps already approved plans back. You can just say, well, we just asked the AI to create it. Then the question comes to construction. Well, we thought this was a really great example that Dark Matter Labs have done, where perhaps the city will not, if we can't have single-use materials, we need to reuse. It also makes sense to have modular construction, where perhaps over time all the physical stuff in the city gets accounted for in a sort of a material base that then takes on different shapes, and you account for the materials in your building or your clothes or whatever it is, and then you pay rent or taxes or whatever for that. Also, 3D printing is a really key development, where you can, like, if you print your shirt, you can melt it down again, etc., etc. Another really interesting example was how already today they have technology where you can scan branches. Rather than chopping trees down and making them into planks, you can scan existing branches that are weight-bearing, or for their weight-bearing capacities, and have a computer model essentially calculate how you can, rather than cutting trees down, you can cut some branches down and then put them together and have those buildings be just as solid as what we would use planks for. So there, in theory, then you could sit with an AI model and envision your new city, like your bostadsrättsförening. We need a new room. We need a new wall. work with the AI and send the robots into the woods or the seaweed farms or the fungi farm or whatever it is, and then rent some robots to build it, and then it's finished the next day. I mean, all this technology exists today. I'm going ahead in the future a little bit. But all this suggests that we need to move from professionals-only linear planning to an inclusive, collaborative planning process. And so we envision a forum where people are involved in every step of the planning process. And it's not just planning. If there's a forum where you feel that you have ownership and impact over the city, this has a tendency or a potential to also take over trade of services, borrowing equipment and so on. It could be a foundation for the economy of a city as well. We have thought a lot about this, so I'm trying to rush through a lot of things in a simple way. But so for the exhibition, we actually built one of these. We built a digital twin where we have the green belt of rewilded forests around Malmö, and also blue belt of seaweed farms, and that sort of add to this material base, and also the provide ecosystem services and so on. And you can click in here and you see a vision of Nyhamnen. We couldn't help ourselves but to create some wetlands and visions of our own, but the idea is really that you move into existing spaces and you can engage with this AI, like what architectural style would you like to see here? What type of place would you like to see? What features? And then if you like, I really like kayaking, you can, in your own words, describe what you want to see. And the AI will give you back a suggestion and you can go, well, we don't like this very much, but you can work until you find something like, I can actually be behind this. So then you upload it to a forum and people can go, oh, you created that, that's cool. I like that, or I prefer this one. And there's a forum for dialogue where we can actually also then get data to see who voted for what. And that data, we do have, you know, this is where it becomes interesting for planners and so on as well. That we see that there's a discrepancy what people think they like. There's a process here where sort of the interaction evolves the level of information. So we see that a lot of people ask for business, but they actually vote for culture, for instance. I mean, the AI is not an exact match, but it's an interesting tendency if we could improve these models. We can also see how the spaces that people think have a lot of potential aren't necessarily the ones that they vote for the most. So we see in this case, the harborfront had the least amount of engagements, but it had the most amount of votes when someone created a good vision for it. So there was a latent potential in this space that not that many people thought was interesting to change. And then of course we can see what they have in common. So all these, the most liked ideas, they're all green, they all contain some social, cultural element, some business, but some kind of community-oriented business. And yeah, so we can, and you know, no cars. So we can sort of get this kind of overview as well. So I guess to sum all this up, the idea is that there is this latent infrastructure of visions, this latent potential that exists with people who know how to live their lives. They know what they like. And that is that's a real source of capital. And we're not capitalizing on it. We're not using it. We don't have the structures to figure out how people live. We think because, you know, until now, perhaps we haven't had proper tools for it. But if we can build a city together, then we can produce not only the built environment, which I think is sometimes overrated, you know. I shouldn't say that too much, but we can build the social infrastructure that we need when the future happens and we don't know, like what we predicted doesn't work out. The dams fail, the war happens, disease comes, whatever it is. We need the social infrastructure to meet those challenges, and we should, with this model, we can produce that, not just a built environment. All right, thank you. I'm sure I was over time.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gustav, and wonderful work, team. You will find Gustav, you will find the other Gustav and Johan and Vanessa outside after we finish off over here. So go and ask more and get to know the book and continue the conversation. I feel so inspired, overly inspired, and so I'm going to take us to the brief now to tell you a little bit about what happened after these visions were made. And I really love that there's like a sense of clarity that you come with as well, 6 months after having created this, and I can see that they're really living through your work and so on. And then one of the ways in which we made use of this was that we took these visions. We were like, thank you teams, thank you for your contribution, and we will go and see what happens when we present these visions to groups of people from the sector and get together in constellations. These are all half-day workshops that we hosted, 2 in Malmö, one from a particular group within EQ Samhällsbyggnad, this Future Solutions group, 1 open workshop, and then 2 other workshops in Stockholm and in Gothenburg at Lindholmen Science Park and at Vinnova, of about 20-25 people in total. And this was a group of very many different hats. We had researchers, we have real estate developers, consultants, sustainability expert, digital developers, architects, project leaders, innovation leads, business developers, many more different roles, people who are very active in the built environment sector, who got to visit these futures. And they came from a wide range of different types of organizations, as we can see over here: construction companies, government agencies, of course municipalities, architecture studios, and so on and so on. And in these workshops, they got to visit your future visions, the visions created by the teams, and we used those as both inspiration as well as provocation in some cases, to get us kind of transferred into one possible future, and to start to discuss what is it that I want to be part of creating, what is it that I am longing for in the sector, and that way teasing out people's visions of their own and having that in conversation with people who came from very different parts of the sector. We used a model that I will shortly present in more detail, called the 3 Horizons framework, which is created by Bill Sharp for the International Futures Forum, where we then reflected on if these are kind of the different things that we would want to be part of, for the future sector that we would want to be part of. What do we need to do in the present moment? What different changes do we need to bring about, and in different ways, how do we do that? So people were in conversation, discussing, identifying different points of change. And then from there, this picture is from the Gothenburg workshop at Lindholmen Science Park. They identified what are some of the leverage points, what are some of the points that we feel that are where we get stuck, or what are some of the knots that we can unravel and actually move towards these futures that we have, that we long for, that we have envisioned, so on. All of this you will find in this brief that you can download. I will give you the link afterwards. I was thinking that now you get to listen and then you can read later. That we collected the conversations, basically putting together the different things that emerged and people shared and discussed on. I want to do a little observation that, of course, not everybody was in these workshops. It was a limited groups. We wanted to keep it rather intimate. There were not it was very much people within the sector and not so much on the fringes of the sector. We also did not have politicians in the room. That was something that was brought up on, like, where are the politicians? They're the ones who should be in here. It was much more of the inner work of people who are very much active in the sector today. And also another observation, or like keep note, that the future is a contested space, and it wasn't all kumbaya, we agree on everything. It was also the purpose of these workshops and the work in total, that we have different future visions. You could hear it in all the teams, that they have very much different starting points and different end points as well. But we can definitely unite and get together around certain things. And one of the things is that the way we are doing things today is not serving us when it comes to, in particular when it comes to the sustainable development goals and the ambitions that we have, and the urgency of the problems that we have at hand, both in terms of social sustainability, but of course material use, climate impact, and so on. All in all, people could very much unite around a longing for a sector that has these elements, and we've heard this already, and it's not a surprise that you heard them from the teams, because these were very much raised through both people's own envisioning and imaginations, but also by coming to contact with these visions. A longing for a sector where maintaining, repairing, and care is kind of the raison d'etre of this sector. A sector that is driven by new economic models that take into account social and ecological values. A sector that is inclusive and it works side by side with communities and supports the communities that is there to serve. That it is there to serve a sector with regenerative values that is very much taking care of the ecosystems that it is so much part of. A sector also with new forms of leadership, and a sector that is enabled by a mindful use of digital technologies. That this is kind of where the digital technologies come in, that they enable us to do things. And with this, going into, now I'm moving in this model, we were over there, now we are closer to today. People identify that we actually already have a lot of pockets of change, a lot of places where we can see smaller, bigger initiatives that are bringing about, that are already today here, very much the now is the new tomorrow thesis over here. Both initiatives that are focused on caring for the existing, repairing, reusing, maintaining, managing of what it already exists. We have a lot of local engagement and community-based initiatives that often, or in some cases, draw on our digital tools that exist. We see different groups developing different ways of relating to the economy and working with new value-based systems. However, if we go into the red line over here, the business as usual, there are certain things that we need to shed, that we need to hospice, that we need to let go of. And here we've heard already from the teams the linear, the short-term economic models. It should not be cheap to be unsustainable. We have our rigid project models and organizational structures that were breaking down beautifully by Gustav earlier. The fragmented ways of working, the contracting, the project practices and so on, that is kind of holding us back. And there are also value things, the ego, that this is how it's always been done, so on and so on. However, from the red line as well, there are things that we should foster and we should keep. Do not throw everything out, and things that we can build on. We have our democratic and systems and values that we should really hold tightly on and make sure that they come with us as we move into a more sustainable future. We have different participatory practices as well, ways of citizen engagement already. We have a lot of expertise in the sector, both in terms of complex projects, managing with different types of groups, taking care of resources and so on. We need to hold on to that and build on those as well. We have also a strong culture. This came strongly from the workshops, the culture of valuing people and human interaction. And I think there's some beautiful initiatives like the Urban Academy in Malmö who's seeking to kind of open up and make the sector even more inclusive. And then there is someone brought up this beautiful lagom dröghet in the sector, this kind of slowness that is also a slowness that gives some reflection and stability, which makes the sector also not act in a responsible way. And this is something that we should foster, but find a way in relating to that in a way that actually serves sustainability and the goals that we want to reach. And finally, we need these bridges between the old system and the new system that is coming into being, which are very much, once again, repetition around economic and business models that can really enable sustainability, both in terms of incentives and costs, tax. We've talked a lot about tax systems and so on. Of course, new accounting models. How do we bring in social and environmental values? policy and regulation. This is the politicians. How do we engage with and actually get policies and regulation and legislation that support this work and does not make it more difficult? There's a lot of cultural work to be done within the sector around the silos, working more in an integrated way, sharing knowledge, trust, perspectives, take into account different perspectives. Once again, leadership was brought up many, many times. And over here, again, the digital tools, open data as an enabler in this. So with this, from identifying and looking into and having conversations around all of these different things that we want to and need to attend to, the participants were asked to zoom in and find kind of these points, leverage points even, where we need to, where if we kind of work on that, then a lot of knots will open up. And it could change, not necessarily everything, but at least we will get closer. And here comes the leverage points. And once again, I want to say that this is not, let's not do the, okay, I'll just take one and break it down even more and break it down. But these are more of all the things that we need to in this transition, times of transition, hold up in the air and hold closely at the same time, in different ways, and see kind of how they relate. And I think in the visions you see different ways in relating to this at the same time. But we must rethink economic models and integrate other values, social and environmental values, and promote regulatory and policy changes. We really need to get there into those changes as well, while we foster the existing, value the existing. We think and act in circles, in a circular way, care for resources. We need to show the way in shifting mindsets and values in our everyday, while we cultivate collaboration and openness and harness digitalization to these ends when necessary, when it can really support us to give rise to these new systems. Yes. In the brief, you can also find this like a little menu of things that people brought with them into their work. One person said, for instance, that they will stop going to workshops and they're going to start acting. Now, there are things that you can also be inspired by if you feel like, oh, I need like a good refresher way of finding my own action points. But before we introduce and welcome the panel, I would like you to just turn to the person next to you. Yeah, I know it's late and it's like, but please turn and just reflect a little bit of how does that resonate. I will bring up the different leverage points over here, but how does it resonate with you, and what is your role? Like, do you have a role in this in somehow? And you will just have 2 minutes, so 1 minute per person, so very short and clean. Yeah, find the person next to you, share, and while I invite
Yeah. I don't care. No. Nobody wants it.
I think it's okay with two because.
Yeah.
Fan säga. All right. Hi. Welcome back. Welcome back. We will build on, and I think everyone is warmed up for the mingle and conversation afterwards. And I'll hand over now to Petra and our wonderful panel, who's also here to share their reflections of what they've just heard and learned. And
Thank you, Reta. Yeah, sound is on. Yes. Um, so much fun and inspirational to listen to you and sort of wrap this up. Fantastic. So thank you, teams. You've been awesome. I have 3 friends with me. Trying to get your titles right here in English is a little bit tricky, but hopefully we have Kristina Gabrieli. You've been with Smart Built for the whole duration of the program, and today you have the title of Deputy Manager there, I think. If that's correct.
That's correct.
That's correct, yeah.
The manager is sitting right there.
And we have Embla Winge. You're at Peab and have driving the climate work there. And you're also CEO of LFM30 here in Malmö. Lokal färdplan Malmö 2030. Yay. And then we have Torben Klitgaard. You're CEO of Blockshub. Blockshub is a little bit of a sister organization to this place. You're also like that, exactly. You're also a co-working space and the Nordic Hub for Sustainable Urbanization. I think that's a nice title to have or topic to set yourself. I thought we'd just start with top of mind reflections. How was this? What resonates? What are you thinking about? Go ahead.
Yes, I can start because in the program Smart Built Environment that was you mentioned it before. I think my first reflection is that it's a lot of things that you have come up with in the teams and that is in the brief that we actually can use when we are ending the program in 2 years or these 2 years, because we have to draw up some vision and roadmap for the sector for the future. So a lot of things to use.
They've done your work.
Yeah, very good, very good.
Yes, and I think I'm overwhelmed by inspiration. And I've been in one of the workshops group, and I thought the work in talking about this, that it's not the future is not technical, it's human, and how we can work together. And so many of the presentation has had the human in the front row, and that's so important, I think. So that was my take on my inspiration.
Yeah, ending up. The first slide we saw when we entered here this afternoon, it said closing events. I would certainly hope it's an opening event because there's so much to be done now, and I'm really looking forward to sort of the pathways of action based on, first and foremost, the 4 fantastic projects. And then, of course, also this process going on in Malmö, Stockholm and Gothenburg with the additional stakeholders within the industry sort of reflecting on the learnings from the projects, but also, I think, very, very much adding on the last slide you showed us on all the different topics that are sort of need to do, and that will be my point coming back to in the discussion, simply need to do things for the industry in the future. But allow me just to applaud the programming of the futures we build by the organizations stepping in. I think the beauty of curating the 4 different projects was fantastic, and then also adding to this round of reflection in the 3 different cities, making, I assume, being Danish, making this sort of a Swedish event rather than just sort of a Malmö event. Sorry for that, but you're really reaching out to both Stockholm and Gothenburg in order to make sure that this is gonna happen, because it has to happen, not only here but in the whole country of Sweden, of course, if you ask me.
On that topic, it has to happen. We need the change. Who's going to do it? Who is sort of holding this stafettpinne in Swinglish then? Who's taking ownership and who's going forward with this?
I think this question is something that we in the sector always says, who is going to take the lead? And I think there is actually, we all have to take the lead. And I thought a little bit about the program Smart Built and how technical it has been, which is natural when it's called, we need to have digitalization, and there are a lot of things in digital information and so on that is not in place yet, but I think we need to turn that look around and start by the visions, start by the future as we want it, and then there are several actors that are important. We have talked at the end. We talked about this, about the financial systems and the business models and so on, and that is what we see in Smart Built. That is the hardest thing, because as quickly as you approach a business model and they are feeling threatened, then we stop. Actually, there is a huge fear, I guess. So I think that is one important. We need to have the financial sector with us in or maybe leading the change.
Yeah, and it's something about the thought of leading something. It's like someone goes in front, but I don't think about our leadership, the strongest leadership, to be the one who goes in front. The strongest leadership is to have the team working together. And like you said before, we are all part of puzzles. So the environment, the built environment in the city is just one puzzle, like we heard in the workshops. But so it's not about taking lead for one organization or one company. Is how the leadership is how can we, the mass, how can we together produce the society we want to live in, and everybody's along with us. And I think that's the leadership we need to get everybody on board. And I don't think it's one company or one organization who is willing to can take the lead of that. We must work together, like we do in Elephant 30.
Yes, exactly. and could you expand a bit on that? Because I think you do that really beautifully within Elephant 30. What is it that makes that work? And how
I
is it
just when formally everybody was like I have the best project, you have the best project, and it's competition. But with climate and the impact on how we are living our lives in a city, we can't. It's not a competition. We have to. Kroka arm is Swedish. We have to go together, and I think the greatest impact of Elephant 30 is when the whole construction company, all construction companies, real estate owners, material producers, architects, everybody that's in the process is working together. We have the same goal, and then we can get progress. And that's not a leadership from the association. It's a leadership of all those in the team. So Elephant 30 is not an association that sets the direction for everybody. We set the direction together. So
it's more about building a culture.
Yeah, a culture. Yeah. And I think that's, like we heard from before, is maybe not the technical solutions that will solve. It's more how we have our what do we want? What do we need? Do we need a new house with those big windows that's also beautiful? Do we need a summer house? Do we need two houses, one on the day as an office building, or one and one at the night as our own building? Didn't pandemic didn't learn us anything. So it's like reevaluating our standards and see what do we really need? Love, family, and food and shelter. I think all those questions in one, not to box it away. Look outside the box.
Yeah.
Okay, we're just rambling.
I was trying to try to translate a Danish word into English, so sorry if I'm not that fast, but I was thinking of this principle to be translated into English. I think it could be something like the principle of totally uncoordinated change at micro level. That is the worst that can happen, right? You do something over there, it's great. You do something over there, it's great. You do something over there. And I feel that we, with this, have a fantastic platform for actually getting together, moving forward. But I would love to see this happens in Sweden as not just, you know, something which has to happen, but as part of an integrated industrial strategy. So it has to be part of some kind of strategy at national level, at regional level, or at municipality level. And then going back to just to more or less copy the quote that was up here just before we got on, I actually brought that quote with me, but it's now overtaken by you, Rita. But I very much like to listen to a great guy called John Hagel, coming out of San Francisco. Google him if you have the time. John Hagel, who's the sort of former CEO of Deloitte's Center for the Edge. He's been working with innovation all his life, and he says small moves, smartly made, can set big things in motion. That's exactly what was up here on the screen earlier on. So of course this has to be integrated into a national framework, but it can start at local level. Going back to your point, and especially also the forum that you showed us, you know, sort of the 360 forum with all the different stakeholders applied at local level. But I do hope that this is going to be in some way or the other integrated in an industrial. It's not about reuse, it's not about waste only, it's about pulling this into a new national mindset of how we can transform the built environment as a sort of a basic building block for all of us in the future. And it has to be ingrained in some kind of national architecture policy or industrial strategy or whatever kind of strategy you apply in Sweden. So call up Boverket and Helene Bjarnegård exactly, you know, now right away, and then say, hey, we got some great stuff here going on, and then we can apply it into whatever framework is at national level. That will really think, that will make this come true in a much faster way than if we just, you know, kept on doing great things at micro level, but without really coordinating that. That's my wish.
I think actually it should be a very good timing, and that to do this change now, because in every management board, etc., everybody is saying it's so hard to predict the future right now. Our models and key indicators, they doesn't fit. If we guess something like we have done before, the models is not right anymore. And this should be really good time to sort of reinvent the models, because the old ones, they doesn't work anymore with the insecurity and so on. So I hope it will be very much work on this level.
Just adding to that offsets creativity and innovation, right? Luckily, we cannot predict the future. Luckily, the boards cannot know what's going to happen tomorrow. And then, you know, they're getting paid quite well, so don't be shy to really provoke on that. You know, the old learning books. I'm not an architect like many of you in here. I take it. I'm a trained economist, and most of the economy, if not all economic school books, are out of fashion. They should not be burned, because you don't burn books, of course. But forget about them. You know, you have to invent the future by inventing the future. Cannot, you know, go back and see how it was done 30, 40 years ago. Those models are simply not working. Because of those models, we are where we are today. The industrial society is where it is today because of those models. We have to flip that coin, and we have to reinvent new ways of thinking.
Last time we spoke, Torben, you mentioned boring innovations.
Yeah. And thanks for bringing the Danish guy over here to talk about something boring. So I'm the boring part in this panel. Well, yeah, of course, it was a reference to Indie Johan Dark Matter Labs, and it's a great pleasure to see that, if not all four of them, then a majority of the four projects have really been inspired by Indie's talks, and I've been inspired and by him over the years. I've had the great pleasure of having Indie in my board in Blocksub for 4 years now, and it's been a great inspiration. He and I did a couple of labs just prior to the pandemic, back in 2019, 2020, called the Boring Revolution Lab. And the point being that actually it was on this because it actually comes out of some of the reflections being done by the 3 workshops, and it's really about rethinking economic models and integrating other values. It's really about promoting regulatory and policy change. In this brief, I took the liberty of bringing it with me today. I hope that's okay, Rita. But so you are all very, very aware of that. My point being is, if you look at the innovation landscape, practically in any industry, we are all talking about technology. We're talking about new materials. If you look about the building environment, especially, innovative process models, business models, etc. Business models, not in the built environment, if you ask me, but in other industries. If in the printing industry, in the music industry, in other air industry, car industry, technology has really, really been the disruptive factor in changing also the business models. Look at the music industry, Spotify, born out of Sweden, completely revoking the way you actually make money within that industry. Some says you don't make money in that industry based on that, but that's another matter. The point being, you don't have that. We have technology in the built environment, yes, great, but it's not as much as a disruptive factor, if you ask me, as compared to any of the other industries. I would argue climate change is the disruptive factor in the built environment, and we really have to push us. So back to the boring part. The boring part, of course, refers to the insistence on actually innovating within the areas of regulatory frameworks, tender procedures, contract models, and business models, etc., etc. I think the project Rehearsals really got into that. There are some great lessons to be taught and to be disseminated out of that project as to how to change your thinking of the value of public housing, etc., etc. But that, of course, the prerequisite of that is to change the innovative thinking of policy, of municipality tender procedures, of procurement policies, etc., etc. And that is what I call the boring part, because to me, being an economist is as great stuff as the rest of the innovation going on. But it just so happens, and that will be my end quote here, I think looking at the innovative landscape in any industry, and that also goes for the built environment, there are lots of innovative ideas going on, lots of innovative tools, technologies, processes, biomaterials now coming on, and then they stop. They are evaluated, great effect, great team, great project, great people, great results, and then what? Complete silence. No scaling, no industry integration, etc., etc. And the prerequisite for making that next move is that we look at innovation at a policy level, regulatory level, at a boring level. That's the point.
Reflections on that from the strategic innovation lead here for 10 years. How do you think about innovation?
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually, this is something we all, when we met those 17 strategic innovation program last week or the week before, we discussed this quite a lot, and also the innovation system, at least in Sweden, maybe perhaps steer against technical innovation, or we are really seeing this in all the programs, no matter what area it's life science, it's process industry, and so on, and all the programs also sort of made a statement. It's not the technology innovation that is the problem, it's the innovation in the other fields. So I totally agree. It was quite boring, that I totally agree with you.
And I can continue with the boring stuff then. That it's just It's just that we were talking about old patterns, and I think we all know that we know a lot of things. We know that we have to change, but why don't we? And we have all this knowledge. We know, but we still go further and further down to the disaster that the climate is about to happen for us. And I think I'm sorry to say, but the boring thing is that we need to have regulations, laws that says you can't build this. You can't. The construction sector is now on a not a carb diet, but a carbon diet, and we are standing in the cashier, and there's a lot of candy still there. We take away taxes from the pollution, taxes on air fuel. We take away biofuel in our fuels. So we have all this business as usual, and it's cost naturally as the costs, and the economy is always saying growth. What about balance? What about balance in our society and what we build in the future? But we won't find that. We're the same as you have to have a non-go there zone. You don't have something in the refrigerator anymore. And that's what the laws is coming about. Okay, now I got a question for you.
Yeah. Perfect timing. Go ahead.
Hi. Well, it's just clear to me that and this is of course Indie Johar stuff as well, but the conversation we're having becomes frustrating because we're saying like, well, hey, look, we're working in this reality which isn't real, which is the transactional economy where we're counting some things and not others. So we're talking about anything that can get traded in various ways. But when we talk about value, value exists. A smile exists. It's worth something. Our experiences as human beings, the environment exists. It's not fake, but we don't have accountancy for it. And perhaps AI and big data can change that, and perhaps we shouldn't need to account for it. But what we're saying is that, why don't these systems add up? Well, we're like pretending what's real isn't real. And I think a tool to adjust that is language. Because we speak of real things as physical things, as infrastructure and I hate the word robust. Like, what is robust? Everyone's saying something is robust. Should things last? Does that make them? Yeah. Anyways, but really, why don't we start accounting for what we value by saying social infrastructure, by talking about the real things that we experience, emotional infrastructure. Beautiful and seeing like whatever decisions we make, what is the negative impact on all these values? We don't look at the negative because we the norm is to accept that it isn't there, and it's just like, well, because we can because this fits on our budget sheets. Well, we need to change that, and one way to do it is to use language, different language, but. Sorry, that's my rant. Thank you.
Yeah, Q&A. Yeah, go ahead. or
do
did anyone want to?
Do you want to comment language?
Yeah, exactly.
I would love to comment if I can, because I'll make it short. I think I agree, but I think again, being an economist, the language is how can you quantify all that value that you are now rightly experiencing, but you cannot sort of take up and say, hey. To, for example, a project developer, this also has to go into the equation, and that's hence my, remark on throw away the books from the economic study, because there's a terrible expression within the economic story saying ceteris paribus. Only focus on the marginal cost. You only look at what you actually can measure, and then you discard all the rest. So that's what you're talking into. And I do believe that we can do not necessarily a 360 calculation is just due course, but we can push that. And I think look at what happens within the biodiversity field. That is actually what is happening there, because you can actually, if you think about it, and if you put some kind of technology on top of that, you can actually quantify sort of the social value, the unhidden value, when we talk about economy of care, that's because we actually do recognize that there is an abundance of value, but we don't necessarily quantify that when we do our calculations in the projects, etc. So I'm looking into a future where we actually can do that, and I do believe we can do that in just due course.
Thank you.
Yeah, and sorry, can I quickly respond to that?
Because we are now in the Q&A, where we'd love to hear from the rest of the room as well. And there will be time afterwards and it's a very important conversation, Gustav and Torben. So do continue that, and I'm sorry for everyone. But Vanessa, very shortly, and then we open up for if anyone else in the room has a reflection or question or thought that they want to share. Yeah, Vanessa.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts? You're talking about regulation. So if we in Sweden were to regulate, spaces can't be empty, they must be used. How would that work? Do you believe in that kind of regulation, or do you have other kinds of regulation in mind when you say we need to work on the boring parts?
Who wants to speak?
Yes, I guess that spontaneously that would be good regulation, because that is something we can measure. So it would be a quite easy task to do. But I think it's. I think that Torben wants to say something. But
it came to me that I don't know the story about Nyhamnen, but you know, those of you who've been in Copenhagen knows we've got exactly the same thing. We call it Nordhavnen, the North Harbor. And in Aarhus, the second largest city, exactly the same kind of, you know, coastal sort of city development going on, etc., etc. One thing that differentiates some of the projects that I know of, both in Copenhagen and in Aarhus, is if you regulate that you start out when you are developing an area by thinking about how can we create the best possible vitality and quality for the people who is supposed to live there, rather than thinking of in what way can we optimize, you know, the total number of square meters in the housing estates. So start out by asking, by law, if you ask me, at municipality level or whatever level, how can we optimize the livability that we want to create, and then ask, okay, what kind of buildings do we need to build in order to live up to the livability strategy? Ask the city developer, what's your livability strategy? And if he cannot ask, he's not, in my eye on view, obliged to actually, you know, bid on that project. Blah, 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 blah. Did you get that? Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that's up to you in Sweden. You're very good at regulation in Sweden, so I won't.
Wonderful.
Well, that's the point. Going back to small moves, smartly made. Because if you decide on doing that, I have the feeling that you are working along those lines in Malmö. But you know, for every city working along those lines, and it might be a sandbox project, it might just be one project, but that be also just like the 4 projects here that are inspirational projects. That kind of project, by working out a livability strategy before, you know, your building strategy. That could be, you know, just like a small stone in the water, actually making waves along the way. So that would be a suggestion.
Wonderful. Is that okay, Embla, or did you very briefly?
Very briefly,
yes.
I don't think that you can regulate what people value. I think we all value differently. So we all live in a space where you value something and I value something else. So I'm talking about regulating the use of fossil fuels. Also, if I go down to we shouldn't use them. That's because it's destroying our planet right now. Okay, I'm taking it way over the high, but the content, there it is. That's what I think we should regulate. How minimize our impact on the environment, but not to regulate the value, but because we are so different, everybody, but we still have to have a society where we all have room. So yeah, it's just about the regulations for me.
Thank you so much. We are moving towards the end of the seminar. I have the first person who kind of raised their hand. Do you want to just introduce? You can hold the microphone. Yeah, introduce yourself and share. Thank you.
It was actually, I was taking part in the last workshops, and it was actually quite a large question in my group, in that and that we are by tradition quite poor at learning from others, learning from other countries, not at least. And I think that this is it's also something crucial. And there are from a innovation point of view, there are some efforts to get the system better at taking into account. But I think there are even there some barriers that are quite hard to check. But Blocksub works really much international.
Just a quick note on that. I think I represent a community, Blocksub, which sort of as an overall umbrella question for all the different 400 plus companies that are part of the community is, how do we balance urban growth and planetary boundaries in the future? That is sort of the question. How do we make sure? Now, the fact is that 84% of the EU population will live in cities in 2050. That's only 25 years from now. 84%. So how do we balance that? And then, of course, balance that in a respectful way, respecting the boundaries and the planetary boundaries. That's very, very. That's the key question. And there are European collaboration across cities. Malmö Stad is part of a lighthouse demonstrator project within the framework of New European Bauhaus, together with 6 other cities. Copenhagen has been part of the same program, the New European Bauhaus, which has only one purpose, simply to collaborate and share learning across the different European cities on this issue of balancing urban growth and planetary boundaries. So there is a sort of a city-to-city knowledge sharing going on, definitely. The question is again, how is it used? Of course, that's another question.
Yes.
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We are running out of time.
Yeah.
This is
Thank you so
fantastic.
much. Yes.
But you need to take it outside.
Yes. Thank you, panel.
Thank you so much.
Let's give them a round of applause. Yeah, maybe you can. Do you want to go and have a seat so you will be closer to when we move out? We just, Petra and I, we wanted to close. I think this is, Torben, exactly what you said. I've been having a hard time with the closing seminar because it's difficult to bring things to a close, but you can see that a closing is always an opening because it forces us to actually reflect on what is it that we've done and what are the next steps. And I think we have a bunch of next steps and so many different topics to discuss more on and more innovation actors to kind of get their hands in there. Petra, do you have a final reflection from today?
I think for me it's something about what I really value in this project is that it in the end really made space for a conversation that's going beyond the normal conversations I think we're all having in our daily practices and daily work. So I think it's very much opened up the conversation and pointed towards another type of dialogue. And we've had that in the teams and in the workshops and across, and I really, really enjoy that. So that's for me the main takeaway. I also think that when we started this, there was one world we were living in. The world today is more higher degrees of uncertainties, a bit more frightening. We are closer to a climate crisis than ever. So I think it's also a sense of urgency that this conversation really, really needs to happen right now.
Absolutely. For me, it's throughout the whole couple of 2 years, and today even more so, is that sometimes you kind of doubt, are we in a transformation? But I think there's just by meeting all the people in the workshops, having the conversations, seeing the teams and so on, like we are in the midst of it now, and it's so uncomfortable because of the systems haven't really got up into the values and the realization that we are doing things differently. So it's that uncomfortable feeling, and we can definitely do more, and we need more regulations and policies and ways of working and work with the culture. But it is at the same time we are on the way. So there's no turning back basically. So that's where we're at. There are a few things that we wanted to lift. If you're like, oh, I want to get even dive deeper, there's a conference happening next week in Stockholm by Shift Sweden. Also one of the initiatives that are picking up a lot of the learnings and taking them forward, and Smart Built Environment, of course. There's also
we also have another strategic innovation program that's up and running now by Dawn, who's in the back of the room here. It's called Match Up, and it's very much about making sure that the people with the ideas and the innovations meet the people that can make the change happen. So if you're curious about that, talk to Dawn.
Or get in touch with Dawn if you're out there.
Yes.
And with this, we would like to thank you for making the time to follow us, and please download the brief, read it, discuss it. Also, you can, through that particular site, you can also find the book if you're like you want to delve in and use the futures as well. I have 4 copies. There's like almost the last copy, so if someone comes to me, I can donate 4 more copies. And yeah, we hope to see you again soon. Have a lovely weekend, and do stay for a conversation and get a drink at the restaurant if you're thirsty for that. Thank you, Petra. Thank you, teams. Thank you, panel. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.